What happens in the sky affects life down here on Earth. The Celestial Compass shows you how and guides your way with astrology you can use from professional astrologer Kathy Biehl. Every episode features her light-hearted, practical forecasts and navigational tips, blended with humor, optimism, and a love of patterns, symbolism, and pop culture references. Kathy translates technicalities into concepts that apply to real life. You'll learn how the current moment ties to where we've been, from the recent past to cycles that last happened years ago, and get a look at where we're heading. And much more, from special topics to special guests. The Celestial Compass, enlightening, entertaining, and empowering. Here's your host, Kathy Biehl.
Greetings, Earthlings. Welcome to Celestial Compass with Astrology You Can Use. I am your host, Kathy Biehl, professional astrologer and professional Aquarian. And today we are going to have a brief update of the forecast and then launch the guests with my first guest, a very special person to me, known to many of you out there in the community. So, to start, we are at a moment of gear shift. So imagine that there is a pond and it is smooth and the water is still and you just want to float on it, lie on your back and float and go to sleep in the water. And you gradually become aware that there's a bubbling and a burbling and energy and heat coming up from below. And that is kind of what is going on this week. We are at this moment minutes away from peak Pisces. We had a Pisces new moon on Saturday. The Sun, Venus, which rules our social mode, and Neptune, Lord of Dreams and Transcendence, I call him the fog machine, are all in Pisces, dreamy, escapist, highly inspired, kind of unhinged, unmoored from reality. If you've been spacey lately, this pileup is why. And then in a little while, after the show is over, the cosmic messenger, Mercury, also moves into that. So we'll be continuing to have really active dreams, to feel like we're telepathic, to know what's going on with people, to be acutely aware of boundaries blurring between sleeping and awake time, between individuals, between groups of people, between you and all of reality. And then this starts to shift on the equinox, which is on the 20th this month, this year, when the Sun moves into the sign of Aries, and then right after that, Venus, ruling our social mode, follows in the sign of Aries. This is the fiery energy, the bubbles coming up from the water. This is life force igniting in everybody. This is motivation coming back online. It will be difficult to continue to float on the beautiful pond because this is highly, highly active, motivated energy. Venus in Aries is in huntress mode. This isn't just lying there waiting for something to float by and grabbing it. This is jumping up and jumping after things. Especially hot on the 26th when the Sun and Venus meet. And then that is followed, the month kind of winds down with a full moon ruled by Venus in Libra, the sign of relationships. So we get to measure, we get a status report on how all of our agreements are doing, how all of our relationships are doing after all of the changes and awakenings that the beginning of 2021 has already brought to us. So for the next day or two, continue to float, to enjoy, to gather inspiration from playing with your dog, from daydreaming, from staring at the sky, from, let's be honest, having some wine if that's what floats your boat, because you're very soon going to be all over creation. All right. And with that, I am very, very happy, thrilled, delighted to welcome in a real friend. People say that all the time. This is a real friend and colleague known to many of you, Donna Woodwell, whom I got to know as an astrologer working with Astrology Hub, and who is much, much more. She is a magician, she's an author, and she is the headmistress of the School of Magic and Mastery. And we're going to talk about one of her passions, which is planetary magic. Donna, are you here?
Of course I'm here. I was listening
Yay.
to your epic forecast.
Well, the show is so seamless, I couldn't even hear you sneaking into the room. So thank you. Thank you for being my first guest on the show. And yes?
It is my honor. And truly, I was thinking about that the other day when I was putting up an announcement for me being on this podcast. I could say, my friend Kathy. It's so rare that you can actually mean that when you are putting up the social media posts. So you all have to know that, like, when I'm having a sucky day, I'll call Kathy and say, hey, cheer me up. And it's totally nothing to do with work. It's just because she is my friend and I call her up and badger her.
We used to have a standing meeting called Wine and Wine, and one of those words has an H in it. Right. So, Donna, I'd like for you to talk a little bit about your background, because your meandering path is very
similar
unusual,
to yours?
And yet I was going to say, but similar and not very. But it's one of a kind, and yet it all makes sense as a whole. So
it does,
please,
doesn't it?
because you are so much more than an astrologer. So please, how did you get here?
How did
anything
I
you
get
want to
here?
say?
I ask myself that all the time. Isn't that a song? How did we get here? All right. So I was an absolutely ordinary, overachieving suburban kiddo. You know, country club life, tennis lessons, track meetings, Model UN, National Honor Society, the works. That was me. I had zero interest in magic, in astrology. As far as I was concerned, that was all a bunch of fun. I ended up going to an international boarding school, coming back to the United States when I was in college and then into grad school. I started, when I moved out to Texas, I started getting really, really ill, to the point where any food I put in my mouth, I rejected. And the ordinary doctors couldn't find anything wrong with me. So one thing led to another. They're finally like, it's just all in your head. Here are some pills. Take them. And I looked at that prescription. I said, no, something is wrong with me. Something is wrong with the way I'm moving through the world. And I wadded up the prescription and I threw it away. So then, as is with the universe, when something is really ready to change, the answer tends to present itself. And one of my graduate school friends said, hey, Donna, I had this doctor. He's interesting. She's like, that was how I call him, interesting.
Yeah, we know that word.
He does regular medicine, but he does homeopathic stuff too. Why don't you go talk to him, and maybe he can find out a solution to what your issues are. And I said, I will try anything. I will try anything. So I went, and I sat down with him, and I think I spent 2 or 3 minutes with him, and he just looked at me. He's like, okay, I can tell you 2 things, like just by sitting here after 2 minutes. Like, you're probably allergic to something you're eating. I can tell by the way you look, and I'm willing to bet we'll find it. But I'm also going to tell you, you are under so much stress, and you are 20 years old. If you continue like this, by the time you're 30, you will be dead. And it was like, bong, the gong went off in my head, because he was serious, and he was a total stranger. He wasn't blowing, some kind of, he wasn't selling anything. He was just calm and scared the shit out of me. So I went and found out, lo and behold, I'm allergic to, everything. And that's why I was throwing up all of the food. But I immediately I went to yoga classes. I started some biofeedback classes. I got really interested in the possibilities of living a different life. But I also there was a woman who was teaching classes in hands-on healing at our local college, and I signed up for her courses, and I went, and I sat, and I meditated for the first time ever, and I was so hot, like burning hot. I had never experienced anything like that in my life, and so when the class was done, she went away. I mean, she sang goodbye to everybody. She says, "You sit there." And I didn't know what else to do since I was so stunned I could barely move. And she came back and she says, "Okay, I can tell you two things. One is you have been fighting some kind of illness or you wouldn't have this kind of response. And two, this kind of energy work you would be extremely good at or you wouldn't have this kind of response. So if you're willing, I will teach you what I know from my time living with a Native American tribe." So she had lived on a reservation, a closed reservation, for something like 10 years. And she, with permission of her tribe, was continuing to practice her spiritual practice that she had learned while marrying into one of the medicine clans from the tribe. So I got an education I never imagined I would get in ceremonial leadership and dream work and all kinds of things. But what's really clear was that from the very beginning is that she had a connection to the tribe and their blessing to do what she was doing, and which was a great gift to us. But if I was going to do this in the world, I can't exactly go running around saying, "Hey, I am a Native American shaman," because I am very much not. And so it was always the understood thing, go find your own tradition. But, what do you tell a 21, 22-year-old kid? Go find your own tradition. What are you going to look for? What do you actually, where do you start? Well,
I'm sure you did.
Yes, you've been in Austin. Being in Austin, I had happened to move in across the street from one of Austin's New Age bookstores. And I'd never been in there, ever, because I had no interest in such things. But Celebration was right across my street in Austin. And so I would literally walk across the street to Celebration, and I would sit there and I'd go, "Wow, there's a lot of books here." And apparently they all came home with me because I still have most of them. So I read everything. I read all about shamanism. I read all about hands-on healing and auras and you name it, tarot. I read it, and because that's what good graduate students do. But in this practice, one of those things I found was astrology, and I had always wanted to know what the sky looked like at the time I was born. And I thought astrology was a bunch of bugs. Even in the midst of the weirdness of shamanism, I still thought astrology was a bunch of bugs. But I found a book. The heaven knows what book that would teach you how to cast your own chart with the book by hand. And so I did it. On rainy afternoon, I postponed my paper that I was supposed to be writing and wrote up this huge description of my own chart. And I'm like, wow, isn't that cool? What a pretty picture. Look at all those triangles. Huh.
So pause button here for everybody. Well, one other thing, for those of you who have only recently started paying attention to astrology, there was a time when there were not computer programs to calculate your charts. And beginning astrology students learned how to actually do it, including me. So, sorry, pause button up.
What Kathy's just saying is, I just revealed my age.
Well, maybe not.
Hey, at that time, there was barely an internet, and there certainly was no place to look them up online. Anyway, yes, I did my first chart by hand, and I said, well, I've got this book, and it's got all these fortune cookie descriptions in the back. I might as well look them up. And so I started looking them up, and as I looked them up, I'm like, wait a minute. This actually sounds like me. No, wait. This really sounds like me. This sounds like me more than all those psych tests that all of my college friends have been giving me because, they have to graduate. This is not possible because astrology is a bunch of bunk. I had this moment of cognitive dissonance. So I did what any other graduate student would do. I got lots of books. And I continued to research. And I had a stack of them. I had 16 or 17 of them on my desk. And in my spare time, I would type every description for every one of my planets, for every one of the books. So I had like 17 for each planet from every book till I got this 80-page epistle of my chart to prove to myself that, wait a minute, they're all saying the same thing, more or less. And the more I wrote, the more it sounded like me. So I get to the point, I'm like, okay, something else is going on here than I recognize as part of my reality. What is it? And thus started my adventure on working with astrology and magic side by side, but eventually they kind of crashed into each other when I realized that I was doing all this stuff, talking to the rocks and the trees and the plants as part of my shamanic training. But you can use those same things to talk to the planets. And you realize that they are like our cosmic midwives. And we are surrounded by living spirit that is coloring the world all around us with the colors of the rainbow. Isaac Newton named the colors of the rainbow after the planets. That's why there are 5 of them. There are 5 visible planets. Anyway, so
now that's one thing I didn't know, but
yes.
This is a perfect segue into our first break. So thank you so much. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes. Everybody hang on for Planetary Magic.
Being a radio host on IOM-FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network.
Life is a flow, and enlightenment is simply harmonizing with the way life really is. Then you find that life is effortless, benevolent, and free of all suffering. Hey everyone, this is GP Walsh, and I want to invite you to my brand new radio show that's launching right here on OMTimes Radio called The Flow of Enlightenment. I've been a spiritual teacher for decades, and my greatest pleasure is being able to share with you these deep and highly practical spiritual ideas. So join me in The Flow every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern and let yourself be transformed.
Want help with your own celestial compass? Visit my site, empowermentunlimited.net, for Astro Insight forecasts for each week, month, and new and full moon. Want to explore the personal impact? Make a decision? Understand another person? It is possible. Click the Services tab to book a personal session with me. That address again? empowermentunlimited.net.
Coping-19, brought to you by CDC and the Ad Council.
If you're feeling increasingly lonely right now, you're not alone. It's totally normal. Even though we may not be able to get together in person, connecting virtually with friends and family still gives you a chance to interact with people and may help raise your spirits. Join a virtual book club, set up group text chats, or online video coffee breaks with coworkers.
Find more self-care and coping tips at coping-19.org.
Welcome back to Celestial Compass, Astrology You Can Use with Kathy Biehl, and we are talking with Donna Woodwell about planetary magic. All right, Donna. Planetary magic appears to me to be a catch-all term for a number of different practices that are like varying spokes off a central hub that people can learn about and also use to work with the planets as conscious energies, as things that you can directly a horrible word is coming to me. Interface. That you can directly. Anyway, it's a grab bag of techniques that all work together that you could specialize in. Once you know about all of them, there are certain ones that might speak to a person more than others, it would seem to me.
I can accept that as a fact.
As a fact. Okay.
As a fact. I mean, let's get real. Okay. I was a graduate student. I could have gone on and been a professor, but I decided when I was in graduate school, I was actually in school to be a journalist. I wanted to be a foreign correspondent in Latin America, but because I got sick, I realized I didn't have the physical constitution to live the life that foreign correspondents live. So in a way, I'm kind of still a foreign correspondent. Foreign just got a different kind of connotation. I interface between the spirit world and the human world. And I did I used what I learned for journalistic work. I went into philanthropy for a while, but my heart kept calling me back to living the magic full time. And so I went into astrology full time, but I always missed the magic part, because astrology, I know lots of astrologers. I was on the boards of several of the large astrology associations. If you've got a book on astrology on your computer, your Kindle, your shelf, it's a very good chance I know who wrote it. Like have had a conversation with them. Some of them, I have their phone numbers in my electronic Rolodex. So when I say Kathy is one of my favorite astrologers, it's a very informed. She is one of my favorite astrologers. Very informed. So for me, I mean, I have spent a lot of time over the last 20 years continuing to read books on the history of astrology, the history of magic, and all of this, to be able to synthesize it down to recognize that just knowing the energies, the planetary energies of the 7 visible planets, that's the sun and the moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, just those, it's like having a box of crayons, the Crayola 7-pack, and realizing that it's like a root of most of magic in the Western world and in the Indian world, because they're all built on the same archetypes. And so once you know those, you can know astrology. But you can also know how they did talismanic magic. But you can also know how they did using electional astrology to choose the perfect times to take action. You can also understand the Kabbalah and how all the pieces of the Kabbalah fit together in order to bring spirits down into matter. You can also understand all of the correspondence systems of why when you pick up a book on magic and it says, to cast a spell for bringing the love of your life, go get a violet plus water from a blah, blah, blah. You can understand why they picked those ingredients, because you have the box of crayons on which all of the things are built. And so that's why it becomes such a powerful, powerful tool for not just understanding ourselves, but understanding ourselves as co-creators with spirit.
And that gets to a point I really want to stress to people, and that is, you can just sit and have your own little fantasy world where you're playing with all of these things, but these are tools and practices that you can build into your physical reality. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the point of it, actually.
I mean, they used to see everything in our three-dimensional world as kind of a crystallized spirit. Matter is just very, very dense spirit. So once you understand let's use the sun, because it's big and bright and everybody's familiar with it. The sun likes to shine. The sun likes to keep us warm. The sun likes to illuminate. So naturally, anything that's down here in the physical world that shines, keeps us warm, or illuminates, would be the way the sun's archetype manifests in our three-dimensional world. Ergo, you can use it as a tool for resonating with the energy of the sun. So if I want more sun energy in my life, if I want that vitality and that spark and that sparkle to help me as I go through my days, I can surround myself with some things. Light. Get more light. Wear gold. Keep warm. All these things that will help you be more vibrant in your world. And it will work just with the sympathetic vibrations. And it will work even if you don't believe it will work. I promise you, if you were to go get more sunshine and like not be in your little hovel all the time, you would feel more energized, because we all do. But think about if it'll work, even if you're not doing it consciously, how much more it will work when you know, hey, sun, thank you. Thank you for illuminating my life.
So this is an example of working with, okay, you mentioned the word archetype, all right? So the planets, these planetary archetypes represent something, a force that is a part of human existence, or they embody the energy of specific forces that are part of human existence. And so you can invoke them, work with them, and treat them as your allies, correct?
Exactly. And I'm glad you brought up the word archetype, because I've had fights with people over the word archetype on more than one occasion, because I think it's come down to pop culture as the illusion that it's somehow a dead thing. It's just a thing. It's like a toaster. An archetype is like a toaster, and a toaster just sits there, therefore an archetype just sits there. But
you haven't
Carl
seen
Jung,
Red Dwarf. There's a toaster that's more than a toaster.
Okay, all toasters are more than just toasters, but that's probably too much for this beginner conversation. So let's get into archetypes. So people will be going into their living rooms worrying that things were going to wake up and anyway. So back to Carl Jung. Very smart guy, was a student of Freud, and loved ancient philosophy. He was reading Gnosticism, he was reading alchemy, he was reading all kinds of stuff, and he's the one that popularized the term archetype. And it's a Greek word, arche, topos, and it means arche means old or original, and topos means the shape of. So archetype means the originating shape of something. And so in its original context, archetypes are the original thoughts of the mind of the one that give the templates for creating all of reality. And so those thoughts, as they take on consciousness, as they take on self-awareness, become the spiritual essence of things. And so archetype and living spirit, at this very high rarefied level of people's concepts of cosmology, are one and the same. But it's easier to talk about in terms of archetypes for most modern minds because, we'll go back to the problem of the toaster. We, in our modern scientific worldview, have tended to think of everything around us as non-living. And it comforts us because when you start talking to people about the shamanic worldview where everything is alive, when they say everything, I mean everything. I mean your computer, your phone, your car, your toaster, your teddy bear, everything has its own form of consciousness. That may be vastly different from yours, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have some spark, which is why the shamanic worldview is so important to a world right now, because most of the problems we have, from the ecological devastation all the way to the racial injustice, come from the fact that we don't recognize the divine spark within other things and the divine spark within ourselves, because if we did, we would treat them differently.
A perfect concept for peak Pisces. I'll just throw that in at this moment. So this might be scaring some people off and thinking, oh, this is so esoteric, this is so intellectual, my brain can't do this. There are actually some very simple and physical ways that people can engage in planetary magic, right? Like a lot of people are familiar with the concept of a moon ritual. You know, on the full moon or the new moon, you do intentions. On the full moon, you do some little thing to release, and on the new moon, you set intentions. Blah blah blah. That's like a baby or a starter kit version of the one whole area of what can be done in planetary magic.
Sure. I think people fail to realize that our entire culture and society is based on, we're primed to do planetary magic. I mean, heck, the days of the week are named after planets. Sunday is for the sun, Monday is for the moon. Tuesday is Mars Day, and if you know anything about any other Romance language like French or Spanish, you can hear it like Mardi Gras, that Mardi for Tuesday is for Mars. And Wednesday, therefore, is Mercury Day. Thursday is Jupiter Day, Friday is Venus Day, and Saturday is Saturn Day. So, what did you do on Moon Day? Well, if you had need of the moon's nurturing energy, you went down the street to the temple of the moon and you left the moon goddess an offering. You said, "Hey, come be part of my life. Come help me out. Come clean my garage with me." And if you wanted to work with the moon on a regular basis, say, "Hey, I want to have a baby. Moon goddess, bless my child, bless my fertility." And you would keep going back until you had manifested in your life. So our days of the week are a celestial calendar, a sacred calendar. By definition, we've just forgotten. So we have adjectives for all of the planets. If someone's mercurial, they're changeable. Guess what? So is Mercury. If someone is martial, they're very strong and directed and militant because, hey, martial, Mars. If someone's jovial, they're happy all the time. They're optimistic. Jovial is, well, the other name for Jupiter is Jove. Saturnine, same thing, dour and depressed. You know, hey, even venereal has meaning in our modern world. It's just, you know, it had to go through the Middle Ages and they weren't really fond of the love goddess Venus. So that's what we thought of venereal. So
this is in our subconscious. It's in our subconscious. It's in our DNA. We just might not be aware of it.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that makes it so very practical. Like when I pick up a cup of chai, I don't see just a cup of chai. I see a whirling collection of all of the celestial energies. I see milk that is loved by the moon. I feel heat that is loved by the sun. I see caffeine that, of course, Mars is totally into. I see the blackness of the tea, which is sacred to Jupiter. I see all of those yummy spices like cardamom and cinnamon that Jupiter loves. So, and hey, put some sugar in it, some honey in it. Venus is on board. All of a sudden, you have a cup that represents every single one of the planets in balance and harmony. And to drink it then can become an easy ritual for inviting all of those planetary energies into your lives, probably one of the reasons why we have chai in the first place. So it's not, how can this be some airy-fairy thing? I mean, to me, it's a way of life.
And it's fun. It certainly elevates existence. Friends. Well, yes, we both do. And so, and you can do this consciously. You can devise rituals going from the concept of the new and full moon ritual. You can devise a ritual to honor and call in the assistance of one or more of these planetary allies.
Absolutely, they want to help. And I think of them as our Earth midwives. You know, Earth came here to have an experience rich with life. But there are other planets in our solar system that are providing their own perspective on our experience. And because we can see them, at least the 7 that we've been talking about, the 7, the moon, and the 5 others, they want to interact with us. And they have been interacting with humans since humans were able to look up at the sky, which is several 100,000 years or more of humanity in our modern form. And that's a really long time. I would argue that most religions have at their heart some kind of astrophilosophy. So You can map planetary energy on most religions on the planet because we are all looking at the same sky. It's the point of commonality from the indigenous cultures of Australia to the Americas to Europe and Africa. We are all participating in the same process. From there, we diverged in a lot of different ways, but when you drill down to the heart of what we all have in common, you're going to find the planets resonating there.
And actually looking up in the sky and learning where the planets are and how they move is another component of planetary magic. That's the scientific component, correct? Do I have that right?
Absolutely. In a sense, the way the planets move and shift was the inspiration for what they mean. You know, Mercury isn't just a trickster because somebody decided, like, by throwing darts at a board. No, Mercury moves like a crazy planet. He's here, he's there, he's everywhere, he's up, he's down. In fact, it took us until Albert Einstein to fully be able to predict where Mercury was going to be at any given moment. We had to account for the relativistic effects for the sun, and they used Mercury as the proof, further proof for Einstein's theory of relativity. So think about that. That it's not just random.
And with that, we're moving into our one more break. So everyone, please stay with us, and we'll continue discussing planetary magic in just a minute.
OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
How would you like navigational tools you can use on your own? Visit my site, empowermentunlimited.net, and click the Shop tab. There you'll find lots of talks and guides explaining the big influences at work now, like Saturn in Aquarius and Uranus in Taurus. You'll also find a variety of guided visualizations for relaxing, clearing your energy, or getting to know planetary archetypes. That address again, empowermentunlimited.net.
Grab a cup of tea or a glass of wine and tune in for Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. Linda creates sacred space for leading female luminaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. A soulful venue where guests openly share the fears and obstacles they've overcome, wisdom and lessons learned, and the personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired Conversations to empower you on your path to authentic, soulful living.
If I could be you,
and you could be me for just 1 hour,
if you could find a way
to get inside
each other's mind,
walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
We've all felt left out. And for some, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We can change that. Learn how at belongingbeginswithus.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Welcome back to Celestial Compass with Astrology You Can Use with Kathy Biehl. We're talking to Donna Woodwell about planetary magic. And right before the break, Donna, you were explaining that Einstein's theory of relativity has a connection to...
So kind explaining. What a nice word. You could have used ranting. You could have used digressing.
No, I wouldn't say digressing. There's a lot of Sagittarius energy in this conversation, people, if you haven't noticed.
I am a double Sag. What did you expect?
So you can look at planets in the sky, and you can actually watch their movement, and that gives you some information. But you can also have direct contact interactions with them. One of my favorite ways of teaching people about what planets do is guided visualizations, where you actually meet the archetype and have a conversation with it about how it works in your life. And that's a part of your approach to planetary magic.
That. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that is the number one way. I mean, reading books only goes so far. Plus, I promise you, the books aren't always right for you. I mean, they're right as a general concept, but if you actually want your own personal flavor of what Saturn means for you, you have to go and enter that slightly altered state, enter that meditative state, use your active imagination, and spend some time hanging out. It'll explain so much more about your life than you could have ever imagined. And charts are powerful, and they can sound like you, but if you want to go a layer deeper than that, then you'll spend the time doing the inner work of meeting with these spirits and finding out what wisdom they have for you. And if you work with them on a day-to-day basis or a week-to-week basis, or just as part of your meditative practice, they really do become very powerful guides that can help you in any moment. So if you're having problems with your computer, Mercury will chime in and he'll suggest, hey, try this, try that, try this. If you're having problems in your relationships, Venus is right there to say, hey, sort this out. If you're having problems with your money, go and you're trying to build wealth, Jupiter, hey. If you're having a problem setting boundaries and saying yes in the right places and no in the right places, Saturn is your guide. And it's like having, a celestial peanut gallery, so to speak.
Well, I'd say more than a peanut gallery. They aren't just standing there applauding and clapping. They're in the middle of things. It's like your board of directors, maybe. Try that. How's that work? Board of directors?
I didn't want to take that one because one of our astrology authors who has written a badass book, Kevin Burke, on astrology, uses the board of directors as his allegory. So I was trying to come up with something.
I see. Okay. Okay. It's your personal consulting firm.
Yes, or your steering committee, maybe. Or I know. I like friends better. They're my friends. They're my friends. What is it? If you were, I hear my daughter when she's in there yammering away with all of her friends at school. There's a whole bunch of them, like a gang, and they're all yammering at each other, and they're completing each other's sentences. It's kind of like that. They're like, but a gang sounds a little more like a thug situation. Pantheon?
Planet Posse.
You could use your Planet Posse. I like that.
Yeah, you may use that. I give it to you.
Okay, thank you. The Planet Posse.
Now, if people really wanted to understand what in the world we're talking about, you actually have founded a school, the School of Magic and Mystery, which is a stunningly beautiful site, Hogwarts Online, and more. And you have a course in planetary magic.
I do, and it's funny. It's like a 10-year in the making course, meaning that we're in its 10th year. I've taught it so many times in different places in different forms. I've taught it in live weekend workshops where we go out into the country where we can see the stars and spend days looking at them. And I've taught it online in little bite-sized pieces, so you can do 10 minutes at a time based on your schedule. So we spend 12 weeks, 1 week for each one of the planets in a deep dive, but I've also written rituals that you can do for yourself to bring the planetary energy alive. And they're not just hokey rituals. They're like ritual for having more energy, ritual for dispelling brain fog, ritual for building wealth, ritual for finding love, all of those kinds of things that we do in our three-dimensional world. I wrote all new rituals, so there's 35 in the course. Plus, each week has its own planetary ceremony and guided meditation that can help you learn how to create your own practice. And by the end, we wrap it up with, okay, you've learned all these things. There's all this new stuff in the cosmos that we're even beginning to learn how to work with. Let's take the logic that you've learned in all these other weeks and apply it to all these fantastic new things. And see how you can create your own rituals and your own ceremonies and continue your own practice. I love it. It's one of my favorite courses to teach.
And it's not at a set schedule. It's
available all the time.
Course. Yeah, available all the time. Okay. All right.
But if you would like, there is a live component. All you have to do is when you purchase the course, you will purchase a membership in my coven at the same time, and you can ask all the questions you like live, and I'm happy to answer them. And at the end of the course, there's no contract to be in my membership program, so people come and go whenever they need things for classes. And the coven itself has its own dozens and dozens of classes, too. It's kind of like Netflix for magical people at this point. So I try to make it as super easy and accessible as possible. Somebody once told me the best way to teach a class is for both the person who is going to sit on their couch for a day and a half solid and binge the whole thing straight through, and for the person who can only afford to listen for 10 minutes a day on their commute. And if you can teach for both of those people, then you have made an amazing online experience. And so that's exactly what we did.
And so people will learn, they'll experience their own visualization connections with the different energies and learn how to make talismans. Can you talk a little bit about how talismans fit in with all of this?
It's actually in part 2 of the course that we actually make the full talismans with the electional charts. But we talk about how to make all kinds of, like if you're going to work with the sun, for example, and you wanted a energy boosting reminder, we might get some gold yarn or thread embroidery floss and braid it with the sun's energy and wrap it around your wrist until it falls off. Technically, it's not a talisman, but it's a reminder of the sun energy that anchors it for you in 3-dimensional world that enables you to work with the energy in a more present kind of way. Yes, we do all of that. There are no secrets. The responses that I get from people, it's so funny because it doesn't matter if they're brand new. They're like, "Oh my God, I had no idea this is what astrology was." If people have been doing astrology for 30 years, they'll be like, "Oh my God, I'm a witch and I've been doing astrology and I had no idea that they work together." So it's a relatively simple, straightforward idea. It's just one of those things that it's not the way astrology is currently being taught. Astrology is currently being taught as, here's a book, memorize all this stuff, here's this complicated chart, figure out all these angles. And it doesn't have to be that hard. It wasn't that hard for thousands and thousands of years. It's only hard to learn that way because it's like trying to learn a language, and no one taught you how to conjugate the verbs. So guess what? Your language is always going to be a mess until someone fixes that problem. The same thing with astrology. If you are an astrologer and you want to learn, you need the living relationship with the planets, which are the verbs. They are the living, moving, breathing heart of astrology. And being able to read charts gets 10 times easier when you are fluent, when you speak planet. And that's why Kathy is my favorite astrologer, because she speaks planet. She spoke planet. We don't do the same kind of astrology. She's a much more modern astrologer than I am. I'm a very traditional astrologer. But we come up with similar resonant responses because we both speak planet. Doctor Who, Rev, you intended.
Yeah, right. Yep, okay, yep. That's a good explanation. So people could come into this from any number of directions, and they'd find like a center point. And could soak up different things and then take it. It would at least make it a more interesting way to look up, which people still do, your sun sign horoscope on your favorite site. You could look at it differently, even with just that piece of
absolutely.
with this understanding.
It is so powerful. You don't even have to have an interest in doing anything with charts. I mean, I had at University of Texas has the Michener Creative Arts Writing Center. So I had people who are aspiring authors who would come and take some of my classes because I can give them the basic archetypal energies which they needed for their fiction projects. And so they always went away like, oh my God, I have the perfect character writing toolkit now that I never knew I had before. I'm like, yeah, add the tarot cards to that too. You're all set. Mm-hmm. So it's powerful because it's wound into our collective consciousness. Our DNA, they're the molecules of story. And these are the characters that are behind them all.
Mm-hmm. Behind the story. Yep. That's what I do too. So that's absolutely it. Would you tell people a little bit more about your school before we wind down, because we're coming towards the end of our time?
I know, it goes so fast, doesn't it?
Yeah.
All right. So I am very pleased to be able to take everything that I learned from my shamanic teacher. Plus, I had a hermetic teacher. I'm an initiate of a secret hermetic tradition on top of it. So I've had a really interesting life, and I boiled all this down into my own school of magic because, thank goodness, we can do all this stuff online now. So I have arranged it into basically two sections. One section is my coven, which is my membership program, which I record a training a month, a ritual a month, a divination forecast a month, and a coaching session for everyone a month. And you get all those things, and come and go. The collection keeps growing. I will have 40-some-odd courses within the next year or something. They're just waiting for people who want to take them. And then I have formal multi-week training courses, 14-week, 15-week experiences that really take you deep. And you can find all of them at www.magicandmastery.com/market. See all the courses that I currently have available. And I'm adding to the list because I basically, at heart, I want everyone to be able to live the magic. It's not that hard. I mean, so much of it makes it sound hard or woo-woo. And really, it's our birthright. We are supposed to live this way. It's only our modern society that's made us forget who we are. Add a few tweaks here and there, and your life is going to change radically. The Western path, esoteric path, is complementary to the Eastern esoteric path. It's complementary because we know Western minds are busy. We want to be engaged in the world, and we want life, and we want to create constantly. And we're not going to stop. We're not going to move to the monastery. And if you're not willing to do those things, then why not make every moment a magical spiritual practice? Doesn't matter what you're doing, whether you're making food or vacuuming the floors or going to work or fixing computers, it doesn't matter. They all have the potential to be magical. That's why I created the school. I want everyday, three-dimensional life. Bring more spirit into it and anchor it into the ground, because that's what we are here for. If we can bring more spirit into matter, we're going to change the world. One person at a time.
And it's definitely a way of living much more mindfully, living more attentively, more deliberately, and not just floating, slogging, sleepwalking.
And fun.
Well,
mindfully and fun.
And fun, and lots of fun, and I will testify to that. So if people want to find you, they go to magicandmastery.com.
Yes.
That is your site, your extensive site, right?
That is the main site. And if you're patient, I actually have a podcast. I filmed the first 10 episodes last year and then stopped because, pandemic. But it's coming back on. I haven't told anybody this. Kathy, you are the first. It's the first time I've ever said this. I've actually recorded the new episodes. They will be coming out on the 24th, I think, the first one. And we'll be coming. I have a co-host. I'm really excited. It's going to be engaging and super awesome. So if you go to my site, you can always just sign up for my mailing list, find out more about me. You can listen to the podcast episodes, or you can always dive right in, join the coven, and come play with us.
And the Coven actually has a map. I mean, you can take a tour of the Coven.
I have a tour guide. You can sign up for a free 15-minute introduction. She'll call you on Zoom, and she will walk you through where everything is. And all of the ceremonies, and there are like 30 of them by now, they all take place in our imaginary world of the Coven Grove, and you can go and place to place. They all are wound into an astral place that you can explore on your own. It's super fun. Super fun. When I sound
It
fun?
is fun. Yeah, it's very fun.
Kathy's there.
And I float in and out. Thank you, Donna. I really appreciate you being my first guest, and it's a blast talking about planetary magic with you. So I hope people will at least go look at magicandmastery.com. It is one of the most gorgeous websites out there. Just from the look of it, you'll be drawn into it. And if you're interested in my stuff, empowermentunlimited.net, sign up for my mail list and listen to my forecast. And I'll talk to you guys at the beginning of May. April. That's it. April. Bye.